My brother leaked my private photos to destroy me. Now I am exposing his darkest secrets and my family cannot handle it. My name is Sarah, 29F. I've always been close to my brother, Liam, 31M. We grew up in a small town, just the two of us against the world. Our bond was strong, or so I thought. But over the last few years, things had begun to change. Liam had been struggling financially, constantly asking for handouts, borrowing money he never repaid, and making excuses that always seemed thin. I tried to help him as best as I could, lending him cash here and there, covering his rent once, even paying his car repair bill. I'd always trusted him, believed he'd get back on his feet, believed he was still the brother I'd grown up with. That all changed the day he came to me with a demand, not a request. Liam showed up at my door one evening, looking disheveled and jittery. He claimed he was in trouble, that he needed a few $1,000s to keep some people off his back. He wouldn't go into details, just kept saying he needed it immediately, that he'd pay me back as soon as he could. I was hesitant. I'd heard the promises before, and I wasn't in a position to bail him out yet again. I had my own bills, my own life, and I was tired of being his personal ATM. When I told him no, his face twisted into something ugly, something I'd never seen before. He looked at me like I'd betrayed him, like I was the one who had done something wrong. The tension was thick, and his voice dropped, a coldness seeping into his words. "You don't want to help your own brother? After everything I've done for you?" He sneered, as if I owed him something, as if I hadn't already gone above and beyond. I stood firm, told him I couldn't keep enabling him, that he needed to sort his life out on his own. He left, slamming the door behind him, and I thought that was the end of it. But I had no idea what he had in store for me. I had no idea how low he was willing to sink. A few days later, I started getting strange messages from friends, cryptic texts asking if I was okay, if I needed to talk. I was confused, worried even, until one friend finally sent a screenshot. My stomach dropped. There, on my phone, was a photo I'd taken for my ex, a private photo that was never meant to see the light of day. I felt the blood drain from my face as I realized what had happened. Liam had somehow gotten his hands on my private photos, had leaked them to my ex, and now they were making their way through the social circles. I felt violated, humiliated, and a rage I'd never known surged through me. I confronted him immediately, storming over to his apartment, barely able to contain my anger. When he opened the door, he had this smug look on his face, like he'd won some kind of sick game. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I yelled, my voice shaking. He just shrugged, leaning against the doorframe with an indifference that made my skin crawl. "I told you I needed money. You didn't want to help. Guess I had to get creative." His words stung, cutting deeper than any insult. He'd done this to punish me, to make me suffer because I hadn't given him what he wanted. I was furious, my hands shaking as I demanded an explanation, demanded he tell me why he betrayed me like this, but he just laughed, a cruel, hollow sound that chilled me to the bone. He had no remorse, no shame. He claimed he was only giving me a taste of my own medicine, that I'd ruined his life by not helping him, and now he was just returning the favor. I felt sick, realizing that the brother I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who'd stop at nothing to get what he wanted. I told him I was done, that I never wanted to see him again, that I was cutting him out of my life. He sneered, saying I'd be back, that I'd come crawling to him eventually. But as I walked away, I knew I was done. I was done with the lies, the manipulation, the constant betrayal. Liam had crossed a line, and there was no going back. Back home, I sat on my bed, feeling a whirlwind of emotions crashing over me. How could he do this to me? We were supposed to be family, supposed to have each other's backs. I trusted him, believed in him, and he'd repaid me by violating my privacy, by humiliating me in a way that I would never have expected. I tried to wrap my head around his betrayal, tried to make sense of how my own brother could be so ruthless, so heartless, but there was no sense to be made. I was dealing with a stranger, someone I no longer recognized. As the days passed, I began to hear whispers from family members. Word had gotten out that I'd cut him off, and suddenly, I was the one being painted as the villain. He'd gone to our parents, spinning some story about how I was overreacting, about how I turned my back on him when he needed me the most. They called, telling me I needed to forgive him, that he was struggling, that family should always stick together. I tried to explain, tried to tell them what he'd done, but they didn't want to hear it. They'd already made up their minds, convinced that I was the one who'd driven him to desperation, that I was the one who'd ruined our family. I felt trapped, isolated, like the walls were closing in on me, I couldn't believe how quickly they'd taken his side, how willing they were to ignore his actions, to dismiss my pain. It was as if my suffering didn't matter, as if I was just collateral damage in their effort to keep the peace. I was furious, betrayed not only by my brother, but by my entire family. They didn't understand, didn't care to understand. They wanted me to forgive, to move on, to pretend that everything was okay, but I couldn't. I wouldn't. Liam had destroyed something sacred, something that couldn't be repaired, and I wasn't going to let him off the hook. I made my choice that day. I wasn't going to be the one to apologize, to bend, to make peace. He crossed a line, and I was done playing the role of the forgiving sister, done letting him use me as his safety net. I knew it would come with consequences, knew I'd lose people, that I'd be judged, ridiculed, ostracized. But I didn't care. I had to stand up for myself, had to draw a line in the sand. Liam had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and I wasn't going to let him, or anyone else, make me feel guilty for cutting him out. The days after cutting Liam out of my life were a blur of anger, shame, and isolation. My parents had completely taken his side, refusing to acknowledge the severity of what he'd done. I thought they would understand, that they would see my pain, but all they saw was a family fractured, that they blamed on me. I was the one who needed to make amends, the one who had overreacted. My mother kept calling, leaving voicemails about how family is everything and how I needed to find it in my heart to forgive him. Every call was like salt in an open wound. I stopped answering the phone, stopped engaging with the people who had so quickly turned against me. Friends I'd known for years began to drift away, unsure of what to believe. Liam had gone out of his way to paint himself as the victim, telling everyone that he was desperate and that I'd abandoned him in his time of need. People ate up his lies, sympathizing with him, even as he flaunted his betrayal. I couldn't understand how they could be so blind, how they could overlook the fact that he'd violated my trust in the worst way possible. The whispers started to follow me everywhere. In our small town, news traveled fast, and it seemed like everyone had an opinion. I couldn't walk into a store or grab a coffee without feeling the weight of their judgmental stares. I could feel them watching me, whispering about how I turned on my own brother, how I'd cut him out over a misunderstanding. My rage grew with every passing day, fueled by the betrayal not just of my brother, but of everyone who believed his lies. I felt like a stranger in my own life, surrounded by people who saw me as the villain. It wasn't long before my ex reached out, claiming he wanted to talk things over. I knew he was only reaching out because he'd seen the photos, because Liam had handed him ammunition to drag me through the mud. He told me he understood why I was hurt and offered to take me back. The audacity made my blood boil. He had been a part of the problem too, another person who saw my pain as an opportunity to tear me down. I told him in no uncertain terms that I wanted nothing to do with him. But he laughed, telling me that he'd seen everything, that Liam had given him access to more than just a few photos. That was the final straw. I went to the police, desperate to find some way to hold Liam accountable for what he'd done. I explained the situation, laid out everything, hoping that there was something they could do. But I was met with shrugs, with empty assurances that there wasn't much they could do without concrete evidence of a crime. I was devastated, furious, realizing that the system wasn't going to protect me, that Liam was going to get away with it. He had betrayed me, humiliated me, and now he was walking free, his reputation intact while mine was dragged through the mud. I knew then that I had to take matters into my own hands. If the police wouldn't help me, if my family wouldn't support me, I would find a way to expose him on my own. I started gathering every piece of evidence I could find, combing through old messages, emails, anything that would show the world the kind of person he really was. I was tired of being the victim, tired of letting him control the narrative. He had taken everything from me, and now was going to fight back. It became an obsession. I spent every waking moment piecing together a case against him, documenting every lie, every betrayal. I reached out to mutual friends, hoping that someone, anyone, would see the truth and stand by me. But the response was tepid at best. They were wary of getting involved, reluctant to take sides in what they saw as family drama. It was infuriating seeing how easily people could turn a blind eye to the pain he'd caused. I realized that I was on my own, that I couldn't rely on anyone but myself to make this right. My parents finally showed up at my door one evening, demanding that I let it go, that I make peace with Liam. They claimed that he was sorry, that he had regretted his actions. But I saw through their words, saw the desperation in their eyes. They weren't there for me. They were there to protect him, to preserve the illusion of a happy family. I told them in no uncertain terms that I wanted nothing to do with him, that I wasn't going to forgive or forget what he'd done. They left, furious, claiming that I was tearing the family apart, but I didn't care. I was done being manipulated, done letting them control my life. With no one left to turn to, I began plotting my own revenge. If the world wouldn't see him for what he was, I'd make sure they did. I started leaking pieces of information, subtle hints about the kind of person Liam was. I shared screenshots, forwarded emails, and made it clear that he was far from the victim he claimed to be. The response was mixed. Some people sympathized, shocked by what he'd done, while others still clung to their belief that I was overreacting, that I was blowing things out of proportion. But I didn't stop. I knew I had to go further to show everyone the full extent of his betrayal. I created a blog, a platform where I laid everything bare. I documented the years of manipulation, the financial abuse, the way he used and discarded me without a second thought. I wrote about the private photos, the way he humiliated me, the way he turned my own family against me. It was raw, unfiltered, a brutal account of the man I'd once called my brother. I shared the link with everyone we knew, making sure they saw the truth. The fall was swift. People began to see him for what he was, began to question his version of events. He tried to fight back, posting his own rebuttals, claiming that I was crazy, that I was obsessed with ruining his life. But the evidence was damning, and people started to turn on him. I felt a surge of satisfaction, a sense of vindication as his reputation crumbled. He had taken so much from me, and now I was finally taking something back. I was finally getting the justice I deserved. Liam confronted me, furious, accusing me of ruining his life. He claimed that I'd gone too far, that I was destroying our family. But I didn't care. I told him that he'd made his choice, that he'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. He humiliated me, violated my privacy, and now he was facing the consequences. He tried to apologize, tried to claim that he hadn't meant for things to go this far. But his words were hollow, empty, and I knew he wasn't sorry. He was only sorry that he'd been caught, that people were finally seeing him for who he truly was. As his life began to unravel, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I'd been through hell, but now he was the one suffering, the one facing the judgment of others. I watched as his friends abandoned him, as people he'd once relied on turned their backs. He'd lost his job, his reputation, everything he'd once taken for granted. And I felt no remorse, no pity. He brought this on himself, and I wasn't going to waste a single tear on him. I had fought back, had reclaimed my power, and I was finally free from his control. But it wasn't enough. I still felt the weight of his betrayal, the lingering shame of what he'd done. I wanted him to suffer, to feel the same humiliation he'd inflicted on me. I began to dig deeper, looking for anything that would hurt him, that would expose him further. I found skeletons in his closet, secrets he'd kept hidden for years. He'd been involved in shady deals, had lied and cheated his way through life, leaving a trail of broken relationships and shattered lives. I compiled everything, creating a dossier of his misdeeds, a record of the man he truly was. I released it, sending it to everyone he knew, making sure they saw the full extent of his lies. The backlash was immediate. People were horrified, disgusted, finally seeing him for what he was. He tried to deny it, tried to claim that I was out to get him, but it was too late. His life was in ruins, and there was no one left to defend him. I felt a surge of satisfaction, a sense of closure. He had taken so much from me, but now I had taken everything from him. I had fought back, had exposed him, and I was finally free. My victory was short-lived. I quickly learned that revenge, no matter how justified, comes with a cost. People started to question my motives, to wonder if I'd gone too far. Friends who had once supported me began to distance themselves, uncomfortable with the lengths I'd gone to destroy Liam's life. They told me that I'd stooped to his level, that I'd become just as bad as him. It was infuriating watching as people turned on me, as they forgot the pain he'd caused me, the way he humiliated and betrayed me. I'd fought back, had defended myself, and now I was the one being judged. My parents were the worst. They showed up at my door, furious, accusing me of destroying our family. They claimed that I'd gone too far, that I'd ruined Liam's life over a mistake. They couldn't see the truth, couldn't understand the depth of his betrayal. They only saw their son, their golden child, the one they'd always protected. They told me that I needed to make things right, to apologize for what I'd done. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that shocked even me. I told them that I'd done nothing wrong, that I'd only exposed the truth. But they didn't care. They were blinded by their loyalty to him, unwilling to see the monster he truly was. The whisper started again, the judgmental stares, the quiet condemnation. I felt like I was back where I'd started, surrounded by people who saw me as the villain. It was infuriating, watching as they forgot the pain he caused me, the way he'd violated my privacy, the way he'd turned my own family against me. I'd fought back, had reclaimed my power, and now I was being punished for it. I felt a growing sense of isolation, a realization that I was truly alone. I'd lost my family, my friends, my support system. I had nothing left but my own resolve, my own sense of justice. But I refused to apologize, refused to back down. I knew I'd done the right thing, that I'd exposed him for the liar and manipulator he was. I'd fought back, had defended myself, and I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel guilty for that. I'd been through hell, had lost everything, but I'd come out stronger, more resilient. I didn't need their approval, didn't need their support. I was my own person, and I'd fought for my own sense of justice. Lion had taken everything from me, but I'd reclaimed my power, had exposed him, and I was finally free. But the isolation took its toll. I felt a growing sense of emptiness, a hollow ache that wouldn't go away. I'd won, but it felt like a hollow victory. I had no one left, no one to share my triumph with, no one to stand by my side. I'd lost my family, my friends, my sense of belonging. I was free, but I was alone. I tried to fill the void with work, with hobbies, with anything that would distract me from the emptiness. But nothing worked. I was adrift, lost, unsure of what came next. Months passed, and I began to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I moved to a new city, started a new job, surrounded myself with people who didn't know my past, who didn't judge me for the choices I'd made. It was a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the pain, the betrayal, the isolation. I felt a sense of freedom, a lightness I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer defined by Liam's actions, no longer haunted by the ghosts of my past. I was finally free, finally able to live my life on my own terms. But the scars remained, a constant reminder of the pain I'd endured. I found myself wary of trusting others, hesitant to let anyone get too close. I'd been betrayed by my own family, abandoned by the people I'd once considered friends. It was a painful lesson, a reminder that loyalty is fragile, that trust is easily shattered. I kept my distance, guarded my heart, determined to protect myself from ever being hurt like that again. I was stronger, more resilient, but I was also alone. I'd sacrificed everything in my quest for justice, and now I was left with nothing but my own sense of self. One day, I received a message from Liam. He'd found me, tracked me down, claiming that he wanted to make amends. I felt a surge of anger, a flash of the old rage that had fueled me for so long, but I ignored it, deleted the message without responding. I had no interest in rekindling that connection, no desire to reopen old wounds. I was done with him, done with the lies, the manipulation, the constant betrayal. He had taken everything from me, but I had built a new life, a new identity, free from his toxic influence. I wasn't going to let him drag me back into the darkness. As time went on, I began to find peace, a sense of closure that I'd never thought possible. I no longer felt the need for revenge, no longer carried the weight of his betrayal. I had moved on, had reclaimed my life, had found a sense of purpose beyond the pain. I had survived the worst kind of betrayal, had come out the other side stronger, more resilient. I was free, finally free, and I was determined to live a life that was filled with joy, with laughter, with genuine connections. I was no longer defined by my past, no longer haunted by the ghosts of my family. Looking back, I realized that I had gained something valuable, something that couldn't be taken away. I had found my own strength, my own resilience, my own sense of self. I had faced the darkness, had endured the pain, and I had come out the other side stronger, wiser, more determined to live a life that was truly my own. I had lost everything, but I had gained myself. And in the end, that was enough. I was free, finally free, and I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I had survived, and I was stronger for it.